Hello lovely weavers! So today's video is telling you a little bit about a floating selvage. So I never used to use a floating selvage, I'm going to be honest. I never did because I thought it would be too fiddly. When I'm weaving I like to weave quite quickly and I thought a floating selvage would just get in the way. However, after using one I have been converted and it does really help you keep a lovely straight edge. Although it does slow down the weaving process a little bit, it's massively worth it. So in this video I'm going to tell you how a floating selvage works in case you haven't used one. I'm going to tell you how you wind it into your warp, how you pop it onto the loom, and then basically how you use it. So hopefully you will find it useful. If you've got any other questions, just leave me a message and of course I will hopefully be able to help you with that. Alright, good luck and enjoy, and I look forward to seeing all your woven pieces after. So when I'm working out how to wind my warp, what I do is I start off by writing out my pattern and my threading order, because I find by doing this, when I'm adding in threads like the floating selvage, it's just a great visual way to make sure you have calculated everything properly. So the loom that I'm using for this setup is an 8-shaft table loom. So I've written out the design to obviously fit that accordingly. So with the pattern that I'm doing here, it's called a rose path pattern. So I am threading the pattern coming up, starting on thread number 1 over here. So I'm taking a thread and I'm taking a header and putting it through onto shaft number 1, and then I'm coming up to number 2, then doing the same for 3, and then coming 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Then I thread a thread down back on number 1, and then I come back up to number 8 and I go 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and then that here is where this repeat stops, because coming in here then is our second repeat, because to do the full repeat you have got, it's sort of the same here. So this is one repeat and then this one is starting the next repeat here. So what I then write under here is how many threads I've got on a repeat. So here we've got our 16 threads. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So that is then our 16th thread here. So then our next repeat, we've then got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, which takes us back to the same place here onto number 2. So then for 2 repeats, I've got 32 threads. Now to complete the repeat, because if we then left it at just doing, say, our 2 repeats, and we didn't bring this thread back included on our calculations, it would then have this empty gap. So the repeat here needs this extra thread back on number 1 here to give us a complete repeat. So for our complete 2 repeats, we've actually got 33 threads, because we're adding in almost an extra thread here to complete the repeat again. We're duplicating number 1 over here. So that gives us then 33 threads to give us these 2 complete repeats. So now, if I then choose I want to work with a floating selvage, I then need to add in these extra threads. So I've got an extra floating selvage thread this side and an extra thread as well over this side. So then by adding those 2 in, I've now actually got 35 threads altogether, or ends as we call them for the warp. So now we've got a total of 35 threads. So I find by doing this process it just helps me, as I say, visually to see what's happening, but also it means then I can see my floating selvages here in place. I can physically count what threads I've got here, and that will give me then the correct total to wind when I'm winding my warp here. So once you've wound your warp and you are now getting it onto the loom and you are threading it up, you can see here where we've threaded them through for our rose path pattern. So if I show you an example here, we have come through onto a thread onto number 1, a header on number 1, and then we go 1, and then you've got number 2, then 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, and then we've come down to do that little thread back onto number 1 here, and then we come back to do 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and then our next repeat again starts back here on number 1. So we've gone across and you can see all those repeats in here. So we repeat those and then we get to then our floating selvage. So you can see that all the other threads are obviously coming through the middle of the heddle here. So we've threaded those all up, but with the floating selvage, that just hangs around in the middle. So it's, as I say, we wind it into our warp as if it's just sort of a normal thread, but then when we thread it, we thread all the other ones, but then we leave that just loose. It doesn't go through any heddles at all. So it just comes through from the back of the loom all the way to the front, just hanging around in the middle here. So then, once then we come to the reed, we then again process all the other threads as normal. So we would put these through the reed in sort of whatever order you want, determined by your pattern. And then here with the floating selvage, this does get threaded through one of the gaps into the reed here, one of the dents. So that one does get threaded through the reed, but not through into the heddles here. So then it comes through the reed, and then when you tie on, that gets just tied on into the groups at the front as normal. So that then just follows then right through to the front, just tied into the groups as you would normally. So now you're ready to start weaving. So with the floating selvage, as I say, it does slow the process down a little bit, and because you are having to think what the threads are doing, but it will, as I say, help you get a completely sort of straight edge, or I say completely straight. As I say, as all weavers know, it is very difficult to get a completely straight edge, so don't worry if you can't, but it will certainly help you control the process, so it will make it a lot easier. So what you would then do, as normal, you'd come to your pattern and you would lift the shafts for that first lift plan. So here we're just going to do a plain weave, so I'm putting down 1, 3, 5 and 7, so you can see those threads are lifting here. So here in the shed, as you see, some of those threads have lifted and some have remained down, and then here we've got our floating selvage, just as we say, floating around in the middle here. So when we pass through our shuttle, as I say, we have to be very careful as to what this thread's doing, because when we're passing the shuttle in to our open shed here, we want to push that thread down. So as the boat shuttle goes in, or if you've got a stick shuttle, you want to press that thread down. So that will come down and then you will pass through. Now, over this other side, you can't see what's happening at the moment, but when it comes out this side, what you need it to do is to go underneath the thread. So I'll show that as we come back out this way. So you push down on one side and then you lift the thread up on the other side to allow the shuttle to go underneath. So as I say, you'll see that in a second on the other side. So we pass through, feet down as normal. So now we're going to then lower these shafts and we're going to raise the next ones, like so. So here again you can see then the floating selvage ready in the middle. So as we did on this side, I'm going to push down the thread on this side, because I'm pushing it down because I'm bringing that shuttle in, so that's going down. And then as the shuttle comes through, we want it, as I say, to travel underneath. So any time that the shuttle comes out, it wants to go underneath this thread here, so underneath that floating selvage. So as I say, you push down on the way in and up for the way out. So that comes up like so. So I'll repeat that so you can see. So you've got 1, 3, 5 and 7 here. So again, we've then got this coming up. So as it goes in, we push that thread down. So down it goes. And on this other side, I'm lifting it up so it can go underneath. So we beat that into place. And then we're going to lower those shafts and lift the next ones. And then so on this side, I'm pushing down. And then here where it's coming out, it wants to go underneath. So it's quite surprising how quickly you do get into sort of a flow doing this. To start with, you are thinking, is it coming off, is it going down? But as I say, down on the way in, up on the way out. And most of the time, the shuttle wants to automatically pass underneath on the way out, so you don't have to worry so much, but I use wool a lot, so it can catch a little bit. But it is just remembering the up and down. And then, as I say, what it does is it aids you to get then a lovely straight edge on your weave here.